All right, so we're live now. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Basándose podcast. This is your host, Marv, and today we have a special episode with returning, okay, a special non-stranger scholar here on the podcast. Of course, I'm talking about Professor John Day. Professor Day, welcome back to the show. It's an honor to have you back. So, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm very well. It's good to be here.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So, guys, you can go back in the episode, check out the episodes on our channel and our podcast. And the first time Professor John Day was on the show, he came and talked about Genesis, many things related to Genesis 1. He published two spin-offs books. That's the way he called them. And now he's currently, bound to writing this massive commentary on the book of Genesis on the ICC really, really prestigious series, the International Critical Commentary, published by TNT and Clark. Professor Day, am I right?
Correct.
Yes, thank you. So he's doing pretty well, and we're glad about that, and we hope life, peace, sustainability, strength, and everything can be bestowed upon him so he can go on and complete this marvelous task. So, I admire you, writers, authors, because I don't have the discipline and the patience to sit down and start writing till blood comes out my forehead. So, it's great. It's great.
Yeah, thank
So,
you. Yeah.
Professor Day, you're doing pretty good now, right?
Yeah. I'm in excellent health at 77. Thank you. Yes.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay, so to get into matters today, we're gonna be talking about Leviathan, Chaos Kampf, the Divine Warrior, this conflict that is, popping up in a good bunch of biblical passages. Professor Day wrote his dissertation and another edition of it in 1985, and I think it's a lot of years, since the first time it was published in 1985. So what we wanted to do is just to get from him some fresh ideas of what he wrote back then. So Professor Day, just to get into matters here, what's this conflict between Yahweh and the great dragon and the sea? What's going on there? What can you tell us about this topic in
Yes.
an overall way?
Many people may not be aware that in the Old Testament, there are quite a lot of passages speaking of God having a conflict either with the sea or with a dragon or serpent, who is sometimes called Leviathan, sometimes called Rahab, sometimes just called Tanin, dragon. And sometimes this conflict is associated with the creation of the world. If you look at Psalms 74 and 86, you will find that God has a conflict with a dragon. In Psalm 74, the dragon is called Leviathan, and in Psalm 89, the dragon is called Rahab. These seem to be two names for the same dragon, because in the Old Testament, both are called the fleeing serpent. Rahab is called the fleeing serpent in Job 26, and Leviathan is called the fleeing serpent in Isaiah 27, verse 1. So it seem to be two names. The name Rahab appears in no text outside the Bible, but Leviathan appears as a name of a seven-headed dragon in the Ugaritic texts. Ugarit is a site on the coast of Syria. I have actually been there about 2007 when I was fortunate to visit Syria and seen Ugarit. It's a marvelous place. And tablets found there in a cuneiform alphabetic script shed a lot of light on Canaanite mythology, especially the mythology of the god Baal, whom the Old Testament constantly detests, but doesn't really tell us too much about him. It's like the church fathers on the Gnostics. Everything is negative, but now we have Gnostic texts found in Egypt.
Text, yeah.
Anyway, sometimes this conflict with the dragon of the sea is associated with the creation of the world, as in Psalm 74, Psalm 89. Sometimes foreign nations are called the dragon. Egypt, in particular, in Ezekiel 29 and 32, and Isaiah 30, verse 7, the Egypt is called Rahab, indicating that these nations are going to be defeated by God, you see. I think in Jeremiah 51, Babylon at the time of the exile is called a dragon. And sometimes this imagery is eschatologized, projected into the future. Like Isaiah 27, verse 1, it's in the last days that God will overcome Leviathan. Amazingly, it's quite amazing. In this verse, Isaiah 27, verse 1, Leviathan is called the twisting serpent and the fleeing serpent. The identical terms used of Leviathan 1,000 years earlier in the Ugaritic text. That's amazing. Wow. How this imagery passed down over the centuries. And then in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, you may recall in Revelation chapter 12, the dragon symbolizes Satan, the devil, and he is cast down from heaven by the angel Michael. And this dragon has 7 heads, exactly like Leviathan. And in chapter 13 of the book of Revelation, we have a 7-headed beast symbolizing the Roman Empire. And then after that, there's another beast, probably deriving from Behemoth, who symbolizes Nero, or Nero Redivivus, the Emperor Domitian, because the Emperor Domitian in the 90s AD was thought of as a reincarnation of Nero. And his number is 666, remember? The number of the beast. And that in Hebrew letters, that denotes the name of the Emperor Nero. So this is a case, the book of Revelation, it's a projection of the first things becoming the last things. In German, it's Urzeit wird Endzeit. The last things become, the first thing become the last thing. So just as you have a battle with a dragon at the creation, so you have a battle with a dragon at the end of time, because the book of Revelation, if we're honest, we have to accept it thinks the Roman Empire is going to come to an end soon. The book of Revelation thinks what it's telling about will happen soon, and that the Roman Empire will be destroyed and the kingdom of God will come. I should mention that the book of Job also has allusions to the dragon, sometimes called Leviathan, sometimes Rahab, and sometimes called the dragon. And in particular, in chapter 41, God asks Job, are you able to defeat Leviathan, who breathes out fire and smoke and is a terrible monster? The answer is clearly no. And that is why immediately afterwards, Job bows down in dust and ashes. So this actually forms the conclusion of the book. This is when he finally accepts that he's said unwise things about God and needs to repent in some way. And many scholars have argued that Leviathan was a crocodile, but it's important. That is nonsense. It's nonsense because it's quite clear this creature cannot be defeated, whereas we know the crocodile was conquered by people in ancient Egypt. They could capture a crocodile, where Leviathan cannot be. Also, Leviathan breathes out fire and smoke, which crocodiles don't. You see, it's a mythological creature. So there's some of the places where this imagery comes in the Bible. I should also mention that in Exodus chapter 15, there's a song of the sea attributed to Moses, but it's probably later really, but it's which talks about God's defeat of Egypt at the sea. And then in verse 18, it's just connected with his becoming king. And in verse 17, the building of the temple, probably the temple in Jerusalem. And this fits the underlying Canaanite myth, because after Baal defeated the sea, Yam, he is acclaimed as king of the gods, and and he has a temple or palace built for him. So that imagery comes through into Exodus 15, where the battle is at the sea, not with the sea there, but at the sea. But the imagery has been influenced by this Canaanite myth. I should mention that this subject, Chaos Kampf, some of your viewers might not know German. This means conflict with chaos. We can say it in English.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, in theology, people always think it's clever if you can put it in German or Latin. It sounds better.
Yeah. To sound more scholarly.
We can put it in English.
Yeah.
I want to say this: the subject was raised by a German scholar called Hermann Gunkel. In 1895, he wrote it was a great book, Schöpfung und Chaos in Urzeit und Endzeit, which means creation and chaos at the beginning and the end time.
Yeah.
And you won't believe it. It took over 100 years for this book to be translated into English, or rather, it was translated by an American after the year 2000, over 100 years late. It was finally translated. He drew attention to all this poetic imagery of God defeating a dragon and conquering the sea. And he also dealt with the book of Revelation, the New Testament imagery. And but Gonkel thought all this imagery went back to the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, primarily because the word Tahom is used for the deep in Genesis 1 verse 2, which is philologically cognate with the word Tiamat, the name of the monster that Marduk defeated in Enuma Elish, the Babylonian so-called creation epic. In that epic, Marduk became king of the gods following his defeat of Tiamat, and he is said to have made heaven out of one half of this monster and earth out of the other. And after that, he has a temple built for him, and he is acclaimed king of the gods. So there is a parallel with the Canaanite myth there. But and there are still a lot of scholars who think who seem to think the Old Testament imagery is influenced by the Babylonian creation epic. But this is clearly wrong, because the names used, like Leviathan, definitely Canaanite. Another point is the dragon in the Old Testament is masculine, whereas Tiamat is feminine, the sea monster in Elish. And she's not really a dragon. She's bovine. She has udders and a horn, horns and an udder and a horn. It's mentioned in Tablet 5. So not many people seem to realize that. So some people say she had 7 heads. That's mistaken. It's Leviathan who has 7 heads in the Canaanite myth. See, Psalm 74 refers to the heads, plural, of Leviathan. But it was only from the Ugaritic text that we know, from the Baal myth, we know that he had 7 heads. Have I said enough, or you want to ask something?
No, you're doing good. You're doing good.
Okay.
I was going to say that let's take Psalm 74 for example.
Yeah, I got it here.
I have read, a bunch of commentaries, and some seem to argue that this is harking back to creation. And when you go to Genesis 1, you don't see quite a conflict between God and a dragon. You see, you got the Tehom, the abyss, the deep. So how would you explain that, Professor Day?
Well, as Professor Wilfrid Lambert once put it, in Genesis 1, a battle has become a job of work. In Genesis 1, God orders the waters. It's the firmament, the heavens, which solid firmament, which splits the waters into 2. But unlike in the Babylonian creation epic, he doesn't make heaven out of one half and earth out of the other, because I think the heaven and the earth are already there. Just as in Psalm 74, it says, my king is God is my king from old, working salvation in the earth. So the battle with the monster and the sea in the Bible, it presupposes there was a primeval earth. It's not in its later full state, it's primeval. And that's the case in Genesis 1. Genesis 1 verse 2, it says the earth was tohu vavohu, the earth was empty and deserted. Genesis 1, I think, depends on Psalm 104. I've written an article on this which should appear in a year's time. I put forward 5 arguments why the psalm is earlier than Genesis, rather than the other way around. Because you see, if you read the beginning of Psalm 104, the thing is, Psalm 104, the order of creation is identical to Genesis 1. So there's a clear connection between them. Many scholars naturally think, oh, the psalm is just, Genesis 1 set to music. It's someone put it. But there are many points which indicate the psalm is more primitive. God actually has a battle with the sea. If you read verses 6 to 9, at your rebuke they flee, at the sound of your thunder that's the waters, take to flight. The waters rose to the mountains, ran down to the valleys, to the place you appointed for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass, so that they might never again cover the earth. Now, if the psalm is dependent on Genesis 1, as some people think, the writer should have been aware of the story of Noah's flood. But he says in verse 9, God put the waters in their place at the time of creation, so they might never cover the earth again. Well, he obviously doesn't know the story of the flood. So that's one argument, and that the psalm is earlier than Genesis. You actually get a battle with the sea. It's not just a job of work, so it's more mythological. The name Leviathan comes in verse 26, whereas Genesis 1 speaks about great sea monsters. Also, verses 20 to 30 of Psalm 104, the things mentioned there come in the same order in Akhenaten's hymn to the sun, believe it or not. And so that shows that those verses, at any rate, of the psalm are dependent on Akhenaten's hymn to the sun, probably passed down by the Canaanites. And that's how the Israelites got hold of it. So if Psalm 104 is dependent on Akhenaten's hymn to the sun, it's difficult to think that it's dependent on Genesis 1. It's obviously Genesis 1 is later. And it's there. The waters are mentioned in the early verses, and, they're put above the firmament and below on the earth. But it's a job of work. It's no longer a battle. It's been demythologized. So that's how I see it.
I think I have.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you don't need to also Babylonian creation a bit, because the word is tahom actually comes in Psalm 104. It's there. The deep is mentioned tahom in verse 6. Oh, by the way, the order of creation in the in the Enuma Elish is quite different from in Genesis. For example, the luminaries, the sun and the moon and the stars, are made right at the beginning, whereas in Genesis, you may remember, they're not made till day 5. Even the vegetation on the earth is there before the sun and the stars, which is a bit strange. So anyway, there are many reasons why, and most Assyriologists don't think that Genesis 1 is dependent on the Babylonian creation epic, so-called. I say so-called because there's more than one Babylonian account of creation, and it's not the only one. But
thank you for saying that.
All right,
because,
okay.
Yeah, because we laymen most of the time assume that there is just one version of creation, and it's not.
One, no. So that's why I call it Enuma Elish, which is from the first 2 words, "when on high."
When on high, yeah.
That's
like
how
that.
It starts.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that section, because again, there are a bunch of people out there. I won't spill the beans here, but regarding the Leviathan itself, there are some people out there who think Leviathan it's it was a dinosaur.
Oh, yes, it's a stupid idea. I some months ago I had to review an article by an expert who argued at great length that Leviathan was not a dinosaur. I don't know. I recommended it for publication. It's a few corrections, but I don't know who the author was because that I wasn't informed. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that article's been published yet. It has been thoroughly refuted. But to me, it's obviously wrong because the writer of Genesis didn't know about dinosaurs.
No.
They're
No.
they didn't have the modern scientific knowledge. And that's another mistake that many fundamentalists make. They think of the Bible as a scientific textbook. They didn't know what we know. I know.
Yeah.
Even
and
Jesus, even the earthly Jesus probably thought the earth was flat. I mean, he was subject to first century.
Oh yeah.
He wouldn't have been able to communicate if he knew all that we know. I
mean, and Professor they do the same thing with Behemoth, because they say Behemoth it was an ancient hippo.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I said, many modern scholars many scholars have thought. These are scholars, not idiots like you're telling me about. Many scholars have argued that Behemoth was a hippopotamus and Leviathan a crocodile, but it doesn't fit because we know the hippopotamus was captured in the ancient world, especially in Egypt. But the whole point of the Behemoth section is Job cannot overcome Behemoth. Now, I have discovered in my mentioned in my dragon book, in the Euclidic text, on 2 occasions, an ox-like creature living in the water is mentioned next to Leviathan or the dragon. And I think that is the origin of Behemoth. It comes in the Baal myth twice. And I think that is the origin of Behemoth.
Do you think there is a similitude between Behemoth and Gilgamesh? Because if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but the goddess was she was angry at Gilgamesh, and she or somebody else sent the divine
she said the bull of heaven.
The bull of heaven. Yeah.
I don't really think there's probably a direct connection there.
Okay.
But they're similar creatures. They're similar kind of creatures.
Yeah. But are they both chaos creatures, or just Leviathan?